Hello everyone, this is Deep Blue with another creative PC mod. Today we'll be installing a 2.5-inch laptop-sized hard drive into a Dell WYSE Z-class thin client. For those of you unfamiliar with them, thin clients are sort of mini computers mainly used by businesses, and they've become sort of vogue as platforms for media center builders and vintage gamers. But also because when the businesses that used them upgrade, they tend to donate them to recycling centers as a tax write-off, and people like you and me can pick them up cheap. So if you, like me, you picked up one of these Z-class clients for about 25 bucks or so without the original flash disk and don't want to spend nearly that much again or more on a puny 4 to 32 gig disk that it was designed for, this is how I rigged up a normal laptop-sized hard drive in there for way better storage at a fraction of the price. Oh, and before we begin, yes, this does possibly apply to the R-class WYSE clients as well, with some exceptions, but they're a whole other mess and I'll explain a bit about them and their oddities at the end of the video for anyone still interested. And of course, you know how it is. This video is provided for entertainment purposes only, and while it worked for me, whatever you do with your own equipment in regard to the original manufacturer warranties and your own personal safety, and so on, is on your own responsibility. Please use common sense, such as never operating on anything plugged into a live power supply, and always ground yourself out by touching a metal doorknob or wearing a grounding strip before working on any electrostatic sensitive devices. Common sense presupposed, here we go. This is an Apacer 8GB solid-state drive, taken from one of my other Z-class clients, by the way, and it looks like a normal 1.8-inch SATA SSD, except here we see that the mounting screw hole on the SSD is off to one side, not nearer the middle, as with similar disks. I'm assuming the only reason for this is to try and force us to use an OEM SSD, and not a cheaper replacement, so all the more reason to use our own laptop drive. For this to work, we need two things: data and power connections that allow our installed new laptop-sized hard drive to work with this system, and also a customized caddy of some sort to hold the physical drive in the frame of the client itself. We can fulfill both needs easily enough, with some ingenuity, but we'll start at the logical beginning with the data power connections we'll need to hook our drive up to when we do physically install it. There are three ways we can get power from our thin client's motherboard to power our SATA drive: an easy way, which works if you don't already have the usual flash disk installed, a harder but better way that allows using both the flash disk and a SATA laptop drive together, and a third way which I didn't bother with but I'll point out for those who may find it useful. In all three cases, we will be making use of the client's onboard SATA data port. Due to limited space within the client frame, an angled, bent down at one end style SATA cable is best. Note the specific angle or L shape of the connector in this picture, as one which bends out the other way would fit even worse than a non-angled one. Here, we see the thin client with the side panel removed. The onboard SATA data cable connector is here, circled. Our cable should angle off to the front of the unit like this, so that it will fit our SATA drive more easily in the next steps. Though this picture shows a unit without the intended flash disk, you can attach both the flash disk and this cable to use both, depending on how you rig up your SATA power cable. With SATA data available, now we need a way to provide power to the SATA drive. The first, easiest method, which has the drawback of making you unable to use the flash disk alongside the laptop drive, is we take a SATA to Molex power adapter from a desktop computer, and a Molex to SATA power adapter from a desktop computer to create a SATA power extender, basically. Plug their Molex ends into each other, and plug the SATA male end into our client's flash disk SATA power connector. Notice, however, that the right side tab of the SATA power cable grips had to be removed to fit. That's the grip which is still attached, which holds onto the connector port. See here where the plastic side grip was removed to fit up to the connector, otherwise it pushes out and you can't fit it up so snugly. Now we have the needed SATA data and power connectors needed for a laptop drive. Method 2, harder due to needing to rig up our own special adapter cable, but better because it lets you still use the original flash disk's spot to hold an SSD. There is a special connector on this board which provides power we can use for our SATA drive without just stealing the flash disk's connector. This little white one by the SATA data cable connector. Yeah, it's hardly standard, but we can work with this. That's called a MicroJST 1.25mm 4-pin connector. MicroJST comes in many sizes. This is specifically 1.25mm and 4-pin, so be sure to find the right size. You can get these in sets of 10 on eBay from China for like a few bucks, and I do advise getting more than you think you'll need because the wires are tiny, and stripping them to form our new connector requires a lot of care if you don't want to just ruin them, as I admittedly did to one or two while making this video. Before we begin, look at the end of the MicroJST connector. You will observe a notched side and a toothy side, which ensure it only fits into the socket one way. This will be important in determining the pin layout, as these may come in different colors or facings than the one I used, and you will need to match the specific wires and not blindly follow color by color, which could be bad if the wires on your MJST are different. Notice the V or greater than sign in the white printed on the system board, pointing to the first pin of the MJST connector, right there. The first pin is indicated by the V arrow greater than sign, whatever you like, and is going to be pin 1 for our purposes. Examine your MJST connector, how it fits into the socket, it's built so it only goes one way, and determine exactly which pin on your connector is really the pin 1. Once that is established beyond any doubt, we're ready to move on. And of course, the pin next to 1 is 2, then 3, and 4 at the opposite end of 1. Now, let's examine the Molex end of a Molex male to SATA female power cable we'll be using with our MJST connector. By determining the top, indented side so it lays out like in my diagram, we'll call the top, usually red plus 5-volt wire, pin 1. The next wire down, ground, usually black, is pin 2. The third wire down, also ground and also usually black, is pin 3. And lastly, plus 12 volt, usually yellow, is going to be pin 4. Now we're going to match the appropriate wires coming from the MicroJST connector to their Molex power equivalents. We will actually be splicing the MJST wires onto the SATA end of the Molex to SATA adapter, discarding the Molex part. The diagrams show the Molex because we need to correctly match the power levels coming from the MJST to the right Molex equivalents of the SATA end. In my case, the SATA wire 1 and 2 are actually swapped from where they are on the Molex end, and yours it might be different, so match the correct Molex equivalent to the SATA equivalent, as I'll be referring to the Molex wire numbers, which may actually correlate to a different spot or order once they hit the SATA end we'll actually be using. Go one at a time, matching these and the voltages they represent with care. First, strip the cables a little to expose more wire on the MJST connector ends, so we'll have more wire to work with, using wire strippers or scissors. But be careful, as these are tiny, easily ruined wires. It may take a few tries, and you may wind up with uneven lengths. That's okay. Being careful to remember which wire is actually which on the Molex end, so you know which is really pin 1 through 4 on the SATA end, even if they don't follow 1 through 4 order. Snip the Molex SATA cable, favoring the SATA end if you have a short one. Strip about 1/2 to a full inch of cable covering off of these wire ends, so you have more to work with here too. At least these are thicker wires, so it should be a bit easier. Now, just follow my diagram and match MJST pin 1 to the SATA's Molex pin 1, whichever that actually turns out to be, the 5-volt, very important. And as we match each wire, twist it together with its partner to form a new connection. MJST pin 2 actually provides the 12-volt, so match it to the Molex SATA's 12-volt, or the Molex pin 4. MJST pin 3 goes to ground, the Molex SATA pin 2, next to the plus 5-volt, wherever that actually is on the SATA end. And MJST pin 4 goes to the Molex SATA pin 3, the other ground, the one next to the 12-volt wire, whichever that actually turns into on the SATA end you'll really be using. Seal our exposed wires by laying the new connections one by one flat on a piece of electrical tape like so. Now, fold the tape over with the wires in the middle as if we were filling a taco shell and pinch the tape together tightly to seal. With our individual wires sealed, wrap them all together in more tape for a neater, less messy cable. And at last, our custom WYSE MJST to SATA power adapter cable is finished. Using this will allow us to power a SATA drive without using up the connector that was made for the flash disk, so we can have both at once. Woohoo! Method 3, which I never bothered with, but may interest someone out there, makes use of yet another connector on this system board. Here, oddly, we have an internal USB connector, like on a desktop computer motherboard. You could use this with some USB adapters and USB to SATA hard drive cables to rig up an internal USB hard drive, but this seems really unnecessary since there are USB ports right on the back of the unit, and we were installing an internal hard drive to get away from the limitations of a USB drive, mainly slower data rates and the inability to install certain operating systems to it. But it is an option, so it deserves mention. With one of the three possibilities chosen, let's look at how we'll rig up a special caddy to hold our drive, which will fit into the same no matter how we choose to go about the data power connections. With our custom cables wired and ready to go, let's create the customized hard drive caddy we'll need to hold our laptop drive in place inside the thin client's body. This is a generic caddy from an HP 6510B, 6515B, 6715B, or 6710B type laptop, which I happened to have in spare. If you have something similar lying around, you can try to make it work, but this particular kind has connector holes in just the right places for this mod, so get this kind or something like it if possible, as they're only like $2 to $5 on eBay. Being extremely careful, cut into the left side of the caddy and bend down flat as shown. We should now have two upwards facing holes we can use to attach the caddy to the client frame. The screw bracket on the back side of the caddy will only be in our way, so carefully pry that off with your pliers and discard it. Our laptop drive fits into the caddy facing up, like so. Screw the drive into the caddy using the 3 screw holes which still attach to it, the 4th having been bent upwards to mount the client frame, remembering to leave the SATA connectors facing out of the caddy so the cables can still be attached. The reverse side should look similar to this. Now, cut a rectangle out of the anti-static baggy material, a little bit larger than the width and length of our drive caddy, as shown. Use electrical tape to fit the anti-static material over the exposed part of the drive so that the baggy material and the caddy form a complete shell. The reason for the baggy material is to both protect the exposed face of the drive from the client's insides, as well as to protect the client's motherboard from any possible risk of touching the metal face of the drive itself. Though the drive will be well above it anyway, I always prefer to do things the cautious way, just in case. And here is the front of our finished custom caddy, SATA ports facing out and unobstructed, ready to install into the thin client. If you're worried about the drive being partially exposed through the client's frame, you can also tape a small sheet of static-free aluminum foil over the bottom half of the side panel, though this will increase the heat on the drive. I'd rather let it breathe. Most desktop computers have an open vent over their drives on the side, but this is a possibility to consider if you prefer. That was a bit of work, I know, but now we're ready to slap that big speedy laptop drive into our thin client and get a ton of storage for pennies on the dollar versus upgrading the puny flash disk. In the video, I'll be doing the easy version of the power cable, since I expect it's what most people will prefer, but the better MJST version is the same. Just plug that into its slot instead of the SATA power slot when that part of the video gets on, and continue. If you go with the internal USB connector, you can figure that one out yourself. To begin, take out the big screws on the bottom that hold the client's base on. Lifts right off. There are 4 screws on the side which keep the side panel on. One down here. And these 2 on the side which are thinner, so lay the screws out and make sure you remember which is which, because these fit in the part here and not on the other ends. And there's the 4th one right there. Lay the unit down flat. This pulls forward and then out at a 45-degree angle. Lay to the side. Take our cable here, depending on which version you're using. Plug it into the appropriate connector. Take our data cable, plug that into the connector. We'll take our custom caddy, plug the SATA data and power cables in. And these only go one way, you can't get them wrong. And this is going to rest partially against the heatsink and be held up with these twist ties or electrical grade zip ties or whatever you want to use through this hole in the frame here, and the other one is going to go through this little tab hole over here, which is a tighter fit, but it works good if you just carefully push it through. But you just need to secure these two holes to these two holes using whatever you choose to do that. Twist tight and fold down if you're using twist ties like I am. If you're using zip ties, just pull them close and snip the ends off. But holding against the heatsink partially and these holes, the drive will lay flat like that, not against the motherboard. Should be tight, not slide around too much. And that'll keep it steady. 45-degree angle. Push down, and then push forward to seal the side panel again. Take our thicker side screw here, put that on the bottom. Yeah? Yeah? Screwdriver? He's so helpful. The thinner ones that go on the back side here. The last bottom screw. You just love watching me work. Okay then, put the bottom on. It has little tabs, just check that you set it in right. The big screws that hold the bottom stand on. And we've done it. As simple as that. And finally, let's just do a quick video to show the new drive installed and working for everyone. We'll go to System Tools, Disks. This is a Linux distribution. It's Zorin OS 12. There's my Western Digital drive. You can see 160 gigs. Disk is at 106 degrees Fahrenheit. That's very good. Nice low temperature. 92.4% full. I actually filled that pretty well up now with all my music and such. Like I said, I prefer to let it breathe through the side panel, but if you want to cover that up with foil or something, that's your choice. But this is a much bigger disk, and it works great, and it's much cheaper. And with this much storage space, you can install Linux or Windows or whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you how to do that here because there's more than enough videos about that out there without my adding one to the pile. For those interested in doing a similar mod using the WYSE R-class model, the difference with the R-class is that it's a bit bigger. I actually like the size better, but the internals are a bit weaker. It uses DDR2 RAM instead of DDR3 and weaker processors. It also uses the older 44-pin IDE DOM type flash disk, which is even smaller, harder to find, and more expensive than the ones in the Z-class, so you definitely maybe want to consider a mod. The problem is this one went under some major revisions during its manufacturing lifespan, particularly somewhere between 2010 and 2011. If you open yours up, you may find that there are SATA ports that you can use to perform this mod, and if you open an older one up, you might find that there are no SATA ports on the motherboard. And this is simply a change from the manufacturing. The older motherboards are actually tracked for a SATA port, which is frustrating if you don't have one because it's just simply not there and it won't work. But there's no surefire way. As you can see here, mine is from 2011 and onward. Those usually have the SATA ports on board you'd need to do a mod like this. But if you open yours up and you just happen to find that you don't have any, there's nothing you're going to be able to do about that. Too bad. Looking inside here of the R class, there's the 44-pin older IDE flash disk that it uses. Right there is a SATA port. That one doesn't do anything. It's tied to the IDE, so don't try to use that one. That's the SATA port if you have one that's going to work. There's the MJST connector that goes with it. Here we have the internal USB if you were planning to use that. But as you see, this is much larger, so you're going to have to come up with some kind of different Caddy mod to fit in there. But yeah, that one SATA port by the flash disk itself doesn't do anything. It's tied to the IDE. You need to use the other SATA port if you have one. And if you come up with some kind of Caddy mod that will fit in this larger frame, then you could make a go of trying to do this with the R class as well. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. I want to thank Ninja Dan for hosting me on his channel, and for anyone who saw my previous video with the Dell Optiplex fan mod. And if you would like to see any more videos of mine hosted on this channel, please give it a thumbs up and encourage it. And please tune into Ninja Dan's channel for hilarious vintage gaming and modern gaming videos that are silly and wonderful. Thank you so much, and have a great day.